Hello everyone, my name is Anna Constantino. I'm an applied linguist, a language teacher, and a teacher educator working in higher education. Here, prompted by the symposium theme, I'm going to explore professional expertise in language education. And I'll be asking, how do language teachers develop their expertise in complex higher education environment? Do language teacher expertise and related practices encompass any potential for fostering teacher autonomy, transformative practices, creativity, and innovation? I'm going to explore some of the salient but also critical features of language teaching expertise and teacher development in environments where professional success as well as learning success are technocratically gauged against metrics and the market notion of effectiveness and efficiency. Finally, I'll open the floor to the discussion by outlining some working direction I have been developing as a way of addressing those challenges. My framework and understanding in this talk rest on my reflective journey as a practitioner researcher and my reinterpretation of the key tenets of explorative practice, a form of practitioner research implemented in language education. Now, I'm going to look at how language teachers develop their expertise. I'll focus on what is specific to academia and seek to identify some of the tension vexing teacher development, which I claim hinder the development of teacher autonomy and creativity, and limit teacher craft or artistry to technique and repetition. Of course, this is going to be a broad brush account and it won't be exhaustive. So, what are the capabilities and the professional knowledge base shared by language teachers? Language teacher knowledge combines several features, some of which are also cross-disciplinary. Language teachers share the knowledge of the curriculum and assessment frameworks, the contingent knowledge of their students and context of practice, the content knowledge of the language taught, which involves mastering its linguistic component, for instance, lexicon, grammar, culture, and so forth, the knowledge of how modern languages are taught, as well as how academic subjects are delivered, the knowledge of the teaching methodology, which in turn entails mastering the application of theories of language development and acquisition and theories of learning. Finally, the mastery of materials and learning activities, the bread and butter of language teaching. By looking at these capabilities and knowledge base, we would certainly agree with the agentive view of professional expertise that has been advanced by the literature on second language education. Language teachers can develop as autonomous beings and transform the contextual practice they interact with. They can engage with their classroom phenomena as complex, context-specific, and politically and morally driven, and act accordingly. Indeed, professional knowledge is contextual and experiential. This knowledge is mostly tacit, it's artistry indeed, it's common sense that allows teachers to get by with their professional practice day by day. As language teacher can make informed decisions about the appropriate methodology and materials to use based on social, political, and moral consideration. In this sense, their action can be viewed as transformative. What about professional development, the nurturing of such expertise? Teacher knowledge is open-ended and ever-evolving. Knowledge and skills are kept up to date through a range of professional development activities. These activities range from gaining initial and further qualification as well as participating in continuous professional development activity across the span of their career. I'll focus now on continuing professional development. Kennedy has proposed a framework of analysis comprising 9 models of development. Heuristically, they can help us situate the nature of the professional development available for language teachers in relation to their transformative potential. Helpful indeed is Kennedy's threefold classification according to their purpose as being transmissive, transitional, and transformative. The purpose of the majority of CPD opportunities for language teachers tend to gather under what Kennedy refers as the transmission purpose. Examples of these are short training courses prompted by local policies or by the teaching resource industry, or show and tell events like in the Cascade model, where teachers disseminate to their peers. These are top-down initiatives run by experts, and even when they are run by peers, they hint at a deficit that the developmental activity needs to fill. Moreover, they tend to be one-off instances with no follow-up, which means that they are not entrenched in the activity of communities of practice. Therefore, they tend to overlook teachers' capability to reflect, conduct a critical inquiry within a community of practice, and take responsibility for their learning. Another example is the relationship teachers establish with their materials and activities. Indeed, those CPD initiatives frame their materials and their activities as static entities. As example of good practices to be shared, they become crystallized into knowledge to pass on and to replicate rather than being embraced as fluid interaction entangled in their complex environment. And when artistry is not engaged reflexively, it severs the connection between the complexity of life in the classroom and life outside. It becomes technocratic, algorithmic management of technique to the detriment of creativity and innovation. Of course, we cannot simply trash transmissive models of professional development. They can be beneficial at times. They provide inputs to pre-service or novice teachers. They can also be helpful for updating activities for in-service teachers. Equally, they can be looked at as opportunities to carve out spaces for a transformative model when they become embedded in a broader agentive vision of continuing professional development, for instance, through enquiry-based stances. Now, the transitional models are interesting to consider because it is here where we can identify divides, the divides where the tension mentioned earlier lurk. Firstly, they are models implemented in higher education. Therefore, they discriminate between language teaching in academia and outside. It is very unlikely the language teacher working in the private sector would engage with these models. Transitional models also flag further divides within higher education. A great number of language teachers are employed as HPLs, hourly paid, and therefore they cannot even reach out to the transitional opportunity, which remain a prerogative of permanent members of staff. So the transitional models are unsustainable for a large component of language teachers working in higher education. Then we have another layer of complexity. Teachers who are in permanent position tend to develop as researchers and embrace new forms of knowledge, entitlement, and expertise, and they might be less orientated to develop as educational practitioners and willing to help their peers to develop if the pressure on their chosen career path is high. Is there a viable transformative model? In Kennedy's framework, action research is suggested as having a transformative purpose. The suggestion of embracing practitioner research is useful if, I claim, is taken broadly. In fact, advancing action research as the response to transmissive development is a challenging in itself. Although giving a voice to practitioner, action research entails a rather time-consuming process. And as I mentioned earlier, the language education sector heavily relies upon hourly paid teachers. So, should we forget the development of those language teachers who heavily contribute to our language programs? This might be counterproductive for a university. How can university assure that the tenets of their central policies based on inclusion and diversity are embedded in language teachers' pedagogy? And how can we expect language teachers to enact transformative practices when most of them are not given the opportunity to appreciate what transformative practices are? To conclude, I'm outlining some propositions. They are working lines I have been developing in my practice by implementing exploratory practice. I'll leave them on the slides for you to read and discuss. Thank you.